Okay, I think we're ready to go. Welcome everyone, I'm John Manalides, the CEO of Commencement Bank, and I want to thank you for joining us today for our training on cybersecurity. I'm really excited for today's topic because it's something that's affecting all of us. I know we have a bunch of clients on the call as well as non-clients, and so I just thought I'd give a little background. We started Commencement Bank in 2006. We're headquartered in Tacoma and we focus on commercial banking. Our legal lending limit is just about 10 million and we have 4 locations. So I really appreciate you listening to the webcast. So I've been a banker for over 35 years. Throughout this time, there's always been bad actors out there trying to steal checks or account numbers or commit fraud, but things are getting worse today. The criminals have gotten smarter, they're bolder, and they're out there every day trying to steal your money and your information. Just a few years ago, some of the big news headlines were about large companies like Target or Marriott, SolarWinds. Well, what's happened since that time? The big companies have gotten smarter and they've made it more difficult for the criminals to get in there and steal the information. So what are the bad guys doing? They're going after you. They're going after your money and they're going after your information. So I think this is a really timely topic. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Greg Hanch, Senior Vice President and Retail Banking Manager.
Thanks, John. My name is Greg Hanch and I will be the moderator for today's session. First of all, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Whether you're joining live or on a recorded version, you've taken steps to be proactive and help protect your data and protect your organization. There's a few reasons why we wanted to offer this session today. First of all, October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. As a community bank, we place significant emphasis on not only protecting our customers' financial security, but also on protecting our clients' most sensitive data. As you'll hear from our presenters today, there are many proactive steps that you and your staff can take to prevent a cybercrime before it happens. This session has been opened up to community members across all of our locations and markets that we serve. We have some members joining us today who had no connection to Commencement Bank before today, so thank you for that. As John said, cybercrime is an ever-increasing threat to businesses, nonprofits, school districts, municipalities, and other targets. According to a recent article in Forbes, the latest anti-phishing working group's phishing activity trends report cited over 1 million phishing attacks in the second quarter of 2022 alone. This is an all-time high since this organization began recording data in 2003. Cybercriminals are frequently targeting small to mid-sized businesses and organizations due to the appealing financial opportunity mixed with limited cybersecurity resources. Our presentation today is going to cover cybersecurity threats, proactive steps that you and your staff can take to prevent a successful attack, steps to take if an event happens where your data is breached, protecting your banking information and bank accounts, and outside resources that are available to you. A few housekeeping items before we begin. All attendees have been placed on mute. Our presentation will last approximately 45 minutes with a Q&A session to follow. For those listening to a recorded version, we will offer Q&A through an attached link. All are welcome to submit questions throughout the session utilizing the dialog box located at the top of your screen. You may select to submit a question anonymously if you wish to do so. Now I'd like to introduce our 2 presenters. Eric Schachtler is the Information Security Analyst here at Commencement Bank. Gerald Kennedy is Senior Vice President and Commencement Bank Chief Information Officer. Eric and Gerald, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for attending, everybody. Today we're going to be looking at the cyber threat landscape for small and medium-sized businesses. This threat landscape is specific to these businesses. There are other threats that are more specific to utility or critical infrastructure sized companies, but we're not going to focus on that today. So here's the list of what we're going to go over, and I'm just going to give a brief overview before we start. Social engineering is at the top. And why is social engineering a threat? It's a threat because it relies on human error. The latest Verizon report cited over 80% of breaches involved a human element last year. Mistakes made by legitimate users are harder to identify and counter compared to software-based intrusion. Our second one is social media, and why is that a threat? It's a threat because of the scale of exposure of information and misinformation. Facebook is the top social media platform, and it has nearly 3 billion monthly active users. The top 6 platforms collectively have 11 billion monthly active users. There is some crossover there, obviously, but that is still a huge number of eyes. The next one is ransomware. Ransomware is a threat because it monetizes the connection between a company and its data, holding a company's potential existence for ransom. The next one is business email compromise, or BEC. This is potential loss via fraud through a seemingly legitimate business transaction because your email account has been compromised. The last one is corporate account takeover, which is similar to BEC, and it also involves a significant financial loss, but the breach approach here is more technical, usually using malware instead of phishing. So moving on to the first one, social engineering. I've got a couple examples we're going to go over. The first one is baiting. The first example would be a USB drive left in a conspicuous place for curious passerby to find it. It could be labeled or be in an envelope with a label, maybe with something that would incite people that want to read it, like yearly bonuses or budget proposals. And then the employee would put it in their computer, and the malware would be uploaded automatically and the breach would be started. Another way this could be done is a too good to be true online ad that would be seen by an employee and they clicked on it. Another way this could be done, instead of a USB drive, it could be a phone, a personal phone or business phone that they unknowingly was compromised and has malware on it ready to install. We're going to go over the cell phone one now also. This is a threat called juice jacking. If you're outside in a public place and your cell phone is dying and you need a charge, there are public USB charging stations available. Unfortunately, these ports can transfer data as well as electricity, and they do not need your consent. There's some good options to get around this. You can disable your device's option to automatically transfer data when a charging cable is connected. This is the default on iOS devices, but Android users should disable this option in the Settings app. You can lock your device once it's connected to the charging station. This will prevent it from being able to sync or transfer data. Or on an iPhone, for example, if your device displays a prompt asking you to trust this computer, it means you've connected to another device, not just a power outlet. Deny the permission, as trusting the computer will enable data transfers to move to and from your device. And this last point may not be foolproof, but it's still better than actively allowing transfers. There are better options, though, than plugging your device into an unknown USB outlet. You can bring your own charging block and use a wall outlet. This is safe. Or you could carry a battery USB with you. These are recently cheap, readily available, and you can use one of them to charge your device multiple times. The next one I want to go over is pretexting. There's 2 parts needed to a pretexting attack. You need a played character and a plausible scenario. A bad actor would contact an employee with a made-up scenario. It's designed to get information out of the employee or get them to do something that would establish a compromised device. It establishes and exploits a false sense of trust, and that information is used to carry out a secondary attack or identity theft. The pretext attack itself isn't going to do anything, but it sets the stage for another attack with elevated access. So an example would be a company calls you and says you missed your utility payment, and to move it along, you need to give your payment information over the phone, bank account or credit card information, just to get it fixed. The solution is never give your information over the phone. The utility company, for example, isn't going to call you. They're going to send you a letter. If it is a company calling you, look up their publicly listed number, confirm that you use that company and they're not just making up a story to scare you, and call them from a listed number to resolve the situation if it even exists. But don't give any information out over that incoming call. That's never safe. Another situation would be a man could walk into a bank looking for a nearby business, and he forgot his phone, but he knows the website for the business. And he could give the employee at the bank, if they agree to help him, he'd just give them the website for the business, and they could type it in, and it goes to a website and unknowingly installs malware on their computer. This could just be an unlegitimate website for a legitimate business. So the solution would be, besides employee training, always Google the company name and don't navigate directly to a given address. This, like I said, the company may be legitimate, but the fake address will not show up above the real address. Okay, and the third example of social engineering, we're going to say phishing. It's a request for personal data, like collecting donations for a charity, needed a social security number to confirm your identity. None of these are not, don't give this information out. If it's a legitimate operation, you should be able to call them back and get into contact with them. An unreasonable threat, such as if you don't give us some money or gift cards or cryptocurrency, then this terrible thing will happen to you. Or a sense of urgency. An example there, you need to do this right now. Time will run out today. And then, like I said before, or this terrible thing was going to happen, or this opportunity of a lifetime is going to pass. They could send you a URL to a site that they would like you to visit, and it might not match what they said it was going to be. That's a suspicious URL. You should always check those and don't go anywhere that the URL doesn't match what it says it's going to do. And it's never safe to click on a link anyway, unless you know who the sender was. These attacks rely on a false sense of fear. They're preying on people. They're making them afraid and scaring them into taking actions that they wouldn't normally take. They might be impersonating a real organization or a fake one. It might be the government. The last point I want to make there is the government's never going to send you a bill over the phone or in your email. It's going to be in a letter. So you can rely on that information. Let's go to the next slide. It'll be social media. Social media. As I'd said before, the threat of social media is the scale of it and the scale of exposure of information or misinformation. Impersonation is a thing. It happens a lot. A way to counter this is to periodically search for your company on the platform you're concerned about, or for yourself, and see if there is a fake account out there. And if there is, the solution is just to contact that platform and they will resolve it. Information on social media is risky because so many people can see it. I put up here a list of things that would be risky to post online because they can be associated with you, or if you have a secret question on the website that asks you this question to retrieve your password or reset your password, having this information can be a threat to you if someone else has it. This isn't something that you would be hesitant to share if a friend was in your house and asked the name of your dog, for example. That wouldn't be something you would hesitate to share. But because of the nature of social media, this information should be considered carefully before you post it. Even if you think it's private, or if you deleted it later, somebody else who saw it could take a screenshot and reshare it, and you wouldn't necessarily ever see it or know it was shared, but that information would be out there. And it could be for an entirely non-malicious reason, but it's still out there. So you just have to be careful. And the final one is social media websites are a common target of cybersecurity breaches. And this can result in the loss of email addresses, passwords, and other private information that you don't want to go to those people that are conducting these breaches. And that's what I got for social media. Let's go to the next slide. So employee training is an important part of cybersecurity. Like I mentioned in the first slide, over 80% of breaches involve a human element. And the way to correct that is better policies and better training for employees. If employees are well trained and follow policies, it makes it very hard for a successful breach to happen with any sort of human, that depends on any sort of human error. Now, we have here a list of just some policies that you could consider. All of these are important. They can vary depending on the size, scale, or complexity of your organization, but they should all be at least considered when you're writing policies. The first one is passwords. Passwords are very important. They guard your data. It used to be the password was sufficient. We are moving now more towards passphrases. So instead of just a word, that could be hard to remember. We use a string of words together, like a phrase, like the word passphrase. And it's, for people, a phrase is easier to remember than, say, the alphanumeric 16-digit password that comes stock with your Wi-Fi password on your home router. Nobody's ever going to remember that. They write it down somewhere and keep it safe. But if you've got 15 different passwords to remember, a passphrase is an easy way to help you remember it without compromising security. So moving on from the phrase, there are some other requirements you need to think about. Length is important. The longer the password is, the harder it will be to guess. Passwords are transferred over the internet in 7-bit packets. So you want your password length to be a multiple of 7 plus 1 to increase that packet count by an additional packet to make it that much harder for your password to be intercepted. So if you've got a 15-digit password, it's going to be a 3-packet interception instead of 2 if it was 14. So yeah, length is important. The next one is complexity. There are a lot of variables in complexity. You need capital and lowercase letters, preferably more than one of each. You need numbers and you need special characters. Special characters, certain ones are restricted on some platforms, but there's still enough out there that to provide sufficient complexity for your passphrase. Storage is the next one that's important. If you only have one password, memorization is a good option. But some companies, some organizations, you have a lot of different products you have, and they have a lot of different passwords, because using the same password for all those products is something we would never do or recommend. If you have that many, writing down is still a bad idea, but they have password safes. You put all your passwords in there, and then you have a single password just to access those passwords. That is currently one of the better storage options for passwords, and that's what we would recommend. There are a lot of them out there. You can Google it, and you'll see a lot of prominent companies that make them, and you can find one that fits your business. Password reuse. We want to avoid reusing the same password on multiple services. We want to avoid reusing the same password between business and personal accounts. Those are all a really big security risk. We want to change our password periodically. The password length and multi-factor authentication usage can determine how long that period needs to be. If you've got a super long password and you use multi-factor authentication, you might wait 6 months to change it. Again, that's up to your company, but those factors can affect that. And that also, changing your passwords, you want to change your password drastically. If your password has been breached on an online service and you don't know about it, and it would say it was an old password you don't use anymore, but when you change your password, you only change, 2 letters at the end, or you add an exclamation point. If you do that consistently, someone who breached another service and got one of your old passwords, it's not going to be hard for them to guess just through logical deduction what your new password is. So make sure when you change your password, you change it drastically. The only other one I have here is multi-factor authentication. This is a mainstream security protocol, and it is best to use it for anything that you don't want breached. Not all services have it yet, but a lot of them do. The next policy you should consider is social media and internet access standards. Employees use social media in their private time, and they have internet at home. But if you have internet access at work, you want to have a policy determining how they use those things at work. You want to consider if you want your employees to reference their employer or appear to represent their employer when they're on their personal social media account. That may be something you want or not want, but it is a policy you should consider. Sensitive data. Employees have access to sensitive data. Leaving it unsecured or visible is a bad idea. Every company has different policies and procedures how they handle it, but it is something you need to consider. The last one here is email account security and use. Email passwords are some of the most important passwords you have because you use your email account to reset your passwords for other services. We're going to go over that more later. An example would be for not crossing those passwords, a company organized event that uses a third-party app. This could be a good event and a morale building, good for the company. More ransomware attacks this year than in the last 4 years combined. That is a really big increase. Ransomware is a tool used by criminals. Like I said before, it monetizes an organization's connection to its data. It does this by encrypting the workstation it was downloaded on and any network or workstation it can connect to from that location. Once it's encrypted, it'll deliver a ransom note to the owners, and they'll have some options going forward. There are some things you can do to mitigate this, and again, employee training is a big one. But it's best to remember ransomware did not cause the breach. There was a mistake or an accident that happened somewhere, and that needs to be addressed to make sure it doesn't happen again. A good one to consider is an offline backup. If you have a one-person business with one computer with all your important data, this could be as simple as putting your important stuff on a thumb drive and storing it on an air-gapped computer in the next room. An air-gap, for those of you who don't know, is a computer that doesn't have a physical or logical connection to the internet. There's no wireless connection, there's nothing, it's completely isolated. There's no way for the hackers to get to it unless they're sitting down at it. There are more sophisticated solutions for larger systems, and there will you'll have to Google those to find them, but they do exist. Antivirus software is another important one. If it's properly updated, it can detect and prevent the malware before it gets a hold. It's not a guarantee, but it's a good start. The biggest one is employee training, and we're going to say this a lot. Employee training is the biggest thing you can do to prevent these breaches from happening. Next slide. Antivirus software. This is an important one. Every system you have, if it's important, should have antivirus software. There are a lot of big names out there that have antivirus software. These companies are large and have resources to collect profiles for new viruses and malware that they're always changing and getting better to infect your systems. There's a website out there. We have it on the screen, avtest.org. They have reviews out for all these different companies and their different AV products there, because there are different levels, and there's a cost-benefit analysis that's different for every business that you'll have to look at. But I want to mention again, just purchasing the software is not enough. It has to be updated regularly. Like I said, viruses and malware are constantly being updated and changing. And if the antivirus software doesn't have the digital fingerprint for this new software or this new malware, it's not going to recognize it and it won't be able to keep you safe.
All right, so Eric has gone over several slides giving us the causes of a lot of these breaches. What I want to get into at this point is the effects. And one of the biggest effects that is going on right now is what's called business email compromise, or BEC. And if you see in the diagram here, it's a 4-step process, and that's just a generic process that it is shown here. But step 1 really comes by what Eric was describing. The criminal gets information over social media, gathers information about you and your company, and then by getting this information, they're able to start sending out fraudulent phishing type emails. They may make some pretext phone calls, whatever they can do in order to get access to your business email. And the interesting thing here is most business owners, most people are very aware of their credentials when it comes to, their financial systems, their credit cards, their banking account. However, it seems that we do not take the care in our email system. And so these bad guys have figured it out. And so through some sort of social engineering, or they actually can go out and just buy breached passwords out on the bad internet. And so once they have that, they start sending or start getting access to your email. Now, once they have access to your email, as Eric mentioned earlier, one of the first things that they can do is set forwarding rules within the email system. And they will forward your email going out to a separate email, so they don't even need access to your email any longer. The other thing that they may do when they're doing this is block your access to the email. But regardless, what they're trying to do is get information in your email on who you do business with. And then once they have that information, for instance, here at the bank, they may see that you email us at the bank, and they get your contact here at the bank, and then they can make requests. The other thing that they can do is go out to your banking website and say that they forgot their account, and they click on it, put in an account name, and then through having your email access, they're able to change your password, and now they have access to your banking software. Again, the end result is what's the catch, and that's on step 4. They're wanting to get the money that is in your bank account out of the bank. What's the quickest way to do that? In some type of electronic transaction, whether that is an ACH transaction or a wire transaction, which is actually even quicker. Again, ACH being automated clearinghouse, 2 types of different electronic transfers. And by sending those transfers, they send the transfers out to an outside account, and they're gone. So again, the weak link here is the email and how to protect it. So things to consider, again, guard your social media, be careful of what out there and is posted. Take care of your passwords. So password policy that Eric was talking about is very important in this case. I would suggest that you put MFA, multi-factor authentication, on your email. I realize that that sometimes is an inconvenience, but for my own personal email, I also set MFA rules. And then maybe finally, a big thing you can do is most email systems, whether you use Office 365, some people use, their ISP, Comcast or CenturyLink. Most of those internet email systems will allow you to set up alerts. So if your email was forwarded out to another email address, it would send you an alert and allows you to know that something's happened. So I would prompt you to do that. And again, as we said, employee training. Employee training is the key. The next piece that I'd like to talk about as far as the effect is called corporate account takeover, or you may have heard it referred to as CATO. CATO is more of the legacy type of breach. It's still happening, but it actually is more technical. And usually it happens through getting an employee or someone to download malware into your system, and then they have access to your computer. Again, with BEC, the criminals have figured out they don't need to do that any longer. All they need is access to your email account. So this one is a little more difficult, a little more sophisticated. It's not happening quite as often, but when it does happen, it has the same effects, because basically, again, what the criminal is trying to do is get access to your financial accounts and be able to transfer funds outside to an account. So things to consider here, again, employee training, password policies. Passwords are very important. Multi-factor authentication. With our system, we do allow you to have multi-factor authentication into your banking system. And then there's also multi-factor authentication that you can do on high-risk transactions. So let's say you want to send out a ACH before it'll let you submit that ACH transaction, you can have it set so that you have to have a multi-factor authentication to do that. And then for corporate account takeover, patch management, it's something we haven't referred to much yet, but it is very important. And what patch management is all of the systems, your computers, whether those are mobile phones or laptops, desktops, servers, they all come out with software that is vulnerable. And so the systems that are running on them have to be patched to patch these vulnerabilities. The malware that is sent out, that malware takes advantage of these vulnerabilities. So having a patch management system to keep the operating systems and the software on your devices updated is very, very important to not have corporate account takeover happen in your business.
Insider threat, the supply chain attack. So supply chain attacks are one of the fastest growing methods of attack. This isn't a end goal like ransomware where once it's on there, you have to pay to get it off. The supply chain attack is more of a method that the bad guys use to conduct the breach. So these attacks are popular because when a common software is breached, the hackers can gain access to potentially all the businesses that use that software. The example I chose was the recent high-profile attack that was the SolarWinds attack. SolarWinds was a software management company. They provided a platform for companies to manage the patches and the updates and the help desk software for all the workstations in their companies, from federal agencies to small businesses. There was a whole range of companies. So the hackers put a malware on an update for this software, and it wasn't detected. So when all these companies downloaded the legitimate update for their software, the malware was installed on all their computers across around 18,000 companies. And the AV, the antivirus software, didn't detect it because it was a legitimate download and update with an expected change in behavior for these client softwares. So the hackers only activated around 100 companies, which is when it was discovered. So this breach, you're not necessarily going to know it right away. They could sit there for months, which is what happened in this case, and just collect data on your company, either to further spread the attack or just gain information about your company. But they could also, at this point, deploy a ransomware to all your systems or all the systems, and then you would have to pay the ransom or follow another resolution. So things to consider. The more third-party vendors you rely on for software, the higher the risk you have of something like this happening. So this is trusted vendors need to have good cybersecurity policies. The more data they have access to, or the more important they are to your organization, the more due diligence you need to do on these companies. Yearly is a good practice. Most software vendors should have a due diligence package that can be requested and reviewed. It shouldn't cost anything, and it should let you see their certifications and how they handle their cybersecurity controls. If it's a publicly traded company like Microsoft, for example, they'll have a SOC report available that you can download. They're not necessarily updated every single year, but they're updated pretty often. And if you have a SOC report, that's a good indication that they're doing a good job on their end to keep their system secure.
Okay, so a SOC report, for those that don't know, is a audit from a third party. So a public company has to have a third party come in and do an audit to their controls, and the report that they give out is this audit showing, hey, Microsoft has these controls and they're complying with the regulations. So it's a report that's given out to the public.
Thank you. So I know when I said like the SolarWinds attack, it was a legitimate software update that caused this breach. Don't let that scare you into not applying security patches. The SolarWinds attack was patched and fixed before it was ever public. So known vulnerability exploits that are fixed are a much greater risk. So if there's a breach out there that happened and the company that had the breach fixed it, and then it was released to the public, now all the bad guys who didn't necessarily know how to conduct a breach like that know about it, and they're going to go look to see if anyone hasn't patched it yet. So it's important. The known breaches are a bigger risk than the unknown breaches. Next slide. So the last important thing here is, where is your data? This can vary a lot. The size of your company, the complexity of your company, what your company does. These are all factors that can just drastically affect how many third-party vendors you need to provide good customer service to your customers. More vendors are inherently riskier, but like I said, in some cases, you just can't avoid it. The more important a vendor is for you, like I mentioned before, the more sensitive data to handle, the more scrutiny you should have for their cybersecurity policies, because you're putting yourself at a bigger risk to trust that company to handle whatever your sensitive data might be. So things you need to consider, you need to know where your data is and who is responsible for it at every stop in your supply chain or your network of dependabilities. Where is that data and who is keeping an eye on it? Again, due diligence on vendors is the best practice, depending on how much and what type of your data they are accessing or storing. A vendor who suffers a breach, that can lead to you also suffering a breach if no one is aware of it. So it is important to stay on top of these policies and which vendors have access to your data. Next.
All right, so now that you suffered a breach, now what do? If you waited until you've had a breach, it's too late. So the time to prepare for a breach is now. In other words, you need to do your own risk assessment, and every business is different. If you're a one-person painter that only has online banking for yourself, your risk is going to be much lower than a larger size firm, such as a dental office that has multiple offices and use cyber dental software. That there is a much greater risk. So determining what your risk is will help you decide what you need to do with a breach. Now, if you are a complex business, one thing you may consider is cyber insurance. There's a lot of insurance agencies out there, and most of them offer some sort of cyber insurance. Not all cyber insurance is equal, so make sure that you read up, and if you have a legal team, have them check into it as well. That also goes along with a breach coach. Many of these insurance companies want you to have someone that is under their jurisdiction to help you with the breach. And so many cyber insurance policies will actually give you who the breach coach should be. And again, the breach coach, what they do is they help you with forensics. They'll help you with media control and helping clean up any type of breach. Again, the one-person business probably does not need a breach coach. However, that one-person business does need an incident response plan, whether that is just a plan of, okay, if I get breached, I need to call the bank and shut off my account. I need to shut down my computer and have it looked at by the local technician. You should still have some sort of plan. The pieces on this slide, as far as the bullet points, the ones in red are the ones that I would primarily be concerned with. Make sure if you have some sort of breach that you contact your financial institutions and have those accounts held to start with. The next thing you want to do is get a hold of the FBI and we'll list this. They have a website for you to log the complaint that you've had a breach. And then finally, you still want to submit a report to your local police department as well. And then I want to go into a little bit on how we as a bank, we have several services to help you protect your information here at the bank. And some of these services are just included, and some of them are ones that you can opt in and use. Ones like Positive Pay. Positive Pay, if you're a business that writes a lot of checks, it is a good module to help stop check fraud. ACH filters allow you to filter what types of transactions can be debited from your account. So you actually have to approve them before those debits come out of your account. ACH calendars and limits. Again, ACH can be both debits and credits, so you can pay and receive. The ones where you're paying are probably more detrimental because those are the ones that are outgoing. And so we have a calendar set up, and on when you are scheduled to send out ACH transactions, if we see a transaction that is outside that calendar, we will stop it and make sure that we contact you. We also put daily and item limits so that you only have a certain exposure up to a certain limit. And that's so if your account does get compromised, you're only liable, or you'll only have that amount that can possibly go out of your account. Again, I've talked about multi-factor authentication. I'll skip down to dual control. Dual control is a very good internal control, so that you, for instance, if you do high-risk transactions like ACH, you can divide it up into one person that enters the transaction and then someone that actually submits the transaction. So dual control within your business, but it also can be used to make it more complex in cybersecurity. So even if you are a sole proprietor and you only have one login, now I realize this is outside the box, but you could potentially have two logins. Now you'd want to have it on two different devices, and you would log into one device to create the ACH transaction, and then you would log into the other device and then submit it. This would make that transaction much more complex so that a criminal would not be able to get any use. Again, that's kind of an outside of the box use, but sometimes with the way the world goes, you might want to think outside the box. Account alerts is just like the email alerts that I talked about. You can set up alerts on your account, so if let's say I've been talking a lot about ACHs. If you have an ACH transaction that goes out, you always get an alert, so you know every transaction that's going. And then finally, wires. Wires are more risky than ACHs. Why? Because when a wire is transmitted, it's very hard to come back. That information goes out and the funds are a lot of times gone. So we do wire callbacks, or we do callbacks on all of our wires, and we give you a PIN in order to do that. All of these pieces are to help you and our customers to maintain security while you still have the convenience to bank using the online banking channel. So in conclusion, again, just to summarize, what can you do? Again, Eric talked about knowing where your data is located. With the way that systems are now, you used to, your email server set in a closet. You had your Peachtree accounting software that was loaded directly on your computer. Now those products are outsourced to, and the data is actually sitting on someone else's server out in cyberspace. Know where that data is. Keeping good policies. The third one here, I want to reiterate this: employee training. You can put all the protections in place, but if you have an employee that chooses not to follow a policy or doesn't know a policy, it's all for naught. So employee training is very important. Managing your antivirus and anti-malware software, as long with your patch management program, and then also keeping some sort of offline backup in case of a ransomware type of attack. And then have a plan when you're, if and when you have some sort of breach. And then again, keeping up with your bank account protection. I do want to end here. We do have some resources that we'd like to share. Cybersecurity, we use a vendor by the name of CrowdStrike. They are a full service endpoint detection cybersecurity vendor, and they also do incident response. So if you're one that wants a full managed service for your cybersecurity, again, it's more expensive, but it's a package deal. They might be someone that you look into. This link goes to their resources. They have lots of cybersecurity resources, security reports out there that you can use. CISA is a government entity. They've got a bunch of free cybersecurity services and tools. There are a ton of them out there. If you had a bunch of time and resources, you could probably build your entire security program without spending a dime just by using the free services that they have listed. The CIS.org, they list 20 security controls. And for those of you that like a checklist of like, okay, I need to check these 20 things that I need to have to make sure I'm secure, that's what this list is. It gives you 20 different controls that you can put in place to make sure you're secure. The incident response, the IC3.gov, is a website out there for the FBI, and that's where you would submit a complaint if you experienced a breach. Employee awareness. We use a vendor by the name of KnowBe4. They're a full service vendor that does employee training, both in video and email type attachments that you can send out. And then it also does testing. So it sends out, and you automate this, where it sends out phishing type emails to test your employees. I do know that they start, the smallest batch is like 25 users. So for a small business, it may be a little spendy. However, it's really not all that expensive if you look at it overall and what your security is worth. Fish.io is a competitor. We do not use them, but I think the cost is a little less using Fish. And then, as Eric mentioned, the antivirus AV-Test, that's an organization that does a lot of testing on different antivirus products and how they're used. We'd like to spend a little bit of time for question and answer. For those of you in the recorded session, if you would like to ask a question, you can reach us at hello@commencementbank.com. And we will get those answered and try to get you an answer and send that right back. With that, I'll turn the time back over to Greg Hanch.
Thank you, Gerald, and thank you, Eric. I certainly appreciate both of you taking the time to help train and educate, especially on proactive steps that our customers and community members can use to protect their data and information. For those who are listening on a recorded version, if you do have questions, please send them to hello@commencementbank.com. A response will be sent in a timely manner. I want to thank everyone who joined us today. I hope this was an informative session, and I hope you left with some tools that you can use to help protect your data and add security to your organization. Thank you very much.